Life is precious, and we all have the opportunity of living it to the fullest. Unfortunately, so few of us know how to manage it all. How do we account for our opportunities? How do we account for our time? How do we account for our relationships, health, spirituality, homes, finances, influence, and careers? How do we account for the one life we have to live? I am so glad you asked. In this program, you will find answers to all of these questions and more. Welcome to the Account for Your Life podcast with your host, the healthy accountant himself, Jay Moore.
What's happening, everybody? I'm going to welcome you back to another episode of the Account for Life podcast. Today, here's what we're going to discuss. Abundance is all around us, but can you see it? You know, in 2023, we have an abundance of just about everything. You know, right now, if you're not following artificial intelligence, which is not new, but it's really coming into play. You know, there's different programs being created I'm not going to say it's to make people's lives easier. It could, but for the most part, it's an abundance of people using or testing out, like, how can we do different things? Or how can we create different things to for lack of better terms, eliminate. So we have an abundance that has never been seen before. I mean, you think the fact that my Bibles are not here, but the fact that we have Bibles, when you read the Bible, you got to know that they didn't even have one. They didn't have a Bible. Moses didn't have a Bible. No one had Bibles. So what they did get at some point, they had a few books. They had the Torah at some point, but that was way down the road. So we're in an abundance that many of us can't say. Even when you read, there's tons of stories inside the good book. You know, I was reading one, and we'll talk about it briefly. And as I was reading that story, I was like, this is us. This is us right now. Right now, more than likely, we all live in a home, someplace that has an abundance of something. I'm gonna tell you what we don't have in abundance. We don't have an abundance of time. Yesterday, yeah, I think I mentioned this yesterday. I've been living like 18,700 and something days. 18,700 something days, and at some point those days will end. So we don't have an abundance of time, but we have an abundance of so many things. So over the past couple of weeks, and we're going to end the month, just really going on this trip of abundance, because as I was talking to my son Jacob last night, I asked him a question. I said, Jake, if you could have anything, I love my son, man. I said, if you can have anything, what would it be? He says, well, $1 trillion. That's what I would like. My mouth dropped open. I says, what? He says, because with that, I wouldn't have to worry about anything else. Everything would be God. He says, I could give to charity. I could do whatever I'd like to do, and I would never run out. I said, this little boy, most people, when they said $1 trillion, if you can have anything, most people that went to something's, oh man, I really want this car. I said, man. See, abundance is all around us, but it all starts in our thinking of how we see things. It all starts with how we see things. There's a story, you know, and I think it's 2 Kings chapter 4. And in that, the first story in that chapter is about a woman who's worried about money. She's worried about taking care of her family. And as she's worried about taking care of her family, she's like, we don't have anything. Her husband had just died. This is 2 Kings chapter 4, starting at verse number 1. I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to tell the story. And well, as you can imagine, if your husband died, if your wife died, if anyone close died, you're probably not going to be thinking clear. But she was thinking clear enough to say, you know what, let's find the man of God. It's kind of like if you knew somebody that that had something you didn't, or that had a connection that you didn't. You said, you know what? We're broke. We're having some issues. Let's find somebody who's not having issues and let's talk to them. She went to the man of God. She says, because the man of God has a connection. She goes to the man of God, Elisha. Now, as I was reading the story of Elisha, Elisha's smart too. He asked Elijah, which was his mentor. He says, hey, Elijah, because Elijah was telling him, he says, look, man, I'm going to be gone soon. You ever had a conversation with somebody and they're talking about what's going to happen? And Elijah's talking about he's telling Elisha, his mentee, what's going to happen. He says, Elisha, I'm not going to be here long, man. The Lord is coming to take me away from here. And Elijah was trying to get rid of Elisha. He says, look, stay here. Look, Elisha's like, I'm not letting this dude leave. He says, stay here and I'll be back. He says, wait a second. Elijah just told him, he's been telling him he's going to get swept away from this place. And Elisha kept saying, no, I'm coming with you. I think it was like 3 or 4 times Elisha tried to get rid of him. And he stayed with him. But Elijah asked him a question. He says, Elisha, what can the man of God do for you? And this is what he said. He says, can you give me a double portion of what you got? Oh, man. He realized, he said, I don't just want a portion for myself. Can I have yours too? I was like, wow. So he asked Elijah for a double portion. And Elijah was like, you asked a hard thing here. We're going to get back to the other story in a second. You asked a hard thing, but you know what? If he gave a condition, he says, you know what? If you see when I get whirled away out of here, then it will be as you asked for it. But if you don't see it, it's not going to happen. Elijah was so connected that he knew the power. He knew who God is. He says, man, you'll only get this if this happens. And it actually happened. Now, so Elisha is the man of God. He has a double portion of what Elijah had. And I'm going to tell you, he went on a spree. But then he got to the woman's house. The woman calls on Elisha. And she says, hey, my husband has died. The creditors are coming. They're going to take my son. They're going to take my sons and they're going to put them to work. What can you do? Elisha's like, why are you calling me? Why are you calling me? Because he's like, wait a second. I ain't paying your bills. Have you ever called somebody, like you need some money? Like, hey man, can you break me off? Elijah's like, I ain't breaking you off nothing. But let me ask you this question. What do you have in your house? Abundance is all around you. Can you see it? He just asked a simple question. What do you got? Just like Jesus asked the same question when it was time to feed the 5,000. Jesus says, what do we have? We can work with something, but we got to have something. See, a lot of times we are so caught up in our problems, right? Think about it. We are so caught up in the challenge. We are so caught up in what's happening around us that we're missing what's sitting. It's kind of like if I'm looking at my desk, oh my goodness, I've had an abundance of stuff on my desk. 2 computers, monitor, ring light, all these things in front of me. I have an abundance on my desk. He said, all right, so what y'all got in the house, man of God's there. I don't know, man. I ain't really got nothing in here. All I got is a little bit of oil in there. What? You got something in there? What you talking about? Now, you got oil. What you think about this? She had something. She said, I just got a little bit of oil in there. He says, look, this is how you do it. He says, go and borrow. You ever been in debt? Have you ever been in debt? Right? Most people are in debt. They're trying to get out of debt. Here's what he said. You're in debt, but go borrow. That's contrary. Go borrow? Wait a minute. I'm broke. I owe people money right now. Why am I going to go borrow? Now, she didn't do this, but I'm just saying most people would not do it. The man of God is there. He's saying, you're in debt. You need to go borrow. She had to go borrow stuff from everybody, the whole neighborhood. Borrow as much as you can. Look at that. As much as you can. He didn't tell her how much to borrow. Uh-oh. See, this is where the abundance is. She had, okay, we're not going to get to that part of the story yet. This is where your limitations, this is why you got to catch this. When I asked Jacob last night, I said, Jacob, if you could have anything in the world, what would it be? This is my son right here, man. You know what he said? $1 trillion. My mouth went, psh. I was like, he didn't bother with, you know what, man, what if we can get a new house? What if we can get new cars? And what if we can this? He just says, look, if I had $1 trillion, then it'll take care of everything I could give. We'd never run out of money. I'm sitting there looking at him like, I said, this is my son here. And I asked him, before I asked him that question, I says, well, what is abundance? And then he says, well, more than enough. I said, have we been talking about abundance? He says, Dad, man, you always talking about this stuff. I said, I'm giggling because Jenny is just like, yeah, you always talking about this kind of stuff. I says, wow, that's interesting. It's actually sinking in. But here's the thing. When Elisha asked her to go borrow, right? He says, go borrow. And he didn't tell her how much. He didn't ask her to go borrow 10 jars, 20 jars, 30 jars. He just said, go borrow and borrow enough, borrow a lot. You're in debt. You got issues. You've got problems. You're going to need the leverage of somebody else. Man, I hope this is speaking to me. And he's like, go borrow. She goes borrow and then get in the house and start pouring oil. They got in the house. They start pouring oil. And then next thing you know, she still has oil. And then her son's like, well, we don't have any more oil. We don't have any more jars left. And then all of a sudden, then the oil stopped. But if you really read into the story, if they had more jars, they would have kept pouring. All right. So now he tells her, now go sell it. You just pour the oil. Now go back to everybody and sell the stuff. So now they're going to go back, sell the jars with the oil in them. They're not even their jars. They're selling the jars of other people. But he says, go sell it and then go pay your debts with the proceeds and you'll have enough to live on. What? This was in their house. See, many of us in 2023, our biggest challenge is not knowing the fact that we actually have more than we know. We have more. We're sitting in our homes. We're having all this abundance in our homes, and yet we're thinking we don't have anything. We're thinking we have little. When just from the story, this story just says that, hey, we have something we can use. You have something you can use today, tomorrow. You have something that you could go into the marketplace with. And I'm speaking to myself too, right? Why? Because there's things I'd like to do. And then when you come up against that, well, you don't have something. Well, you don't focus on what you don't have. Man, I was listening to something last night and actually, it was a fortune cookie. You know, Jacob reads the fortune because we went to a Chinese restaurant last night, and he reads the fortune, and it was interesting. But in essence, the fortune cookie, the little whatever it says, it really said, I think it said like a wise man doesn't focus on what he doesn't have, but only pays attention to what he does have. Only pays attention to what he does have. So in the story, if she's focused on what she doesn't have, she's not going to do anything. But when you focus on what you do have, then all of a sudden, bam, you find something like, oh, shoot, I had that the whole time. Yeah, it's all around us. See, 2023 is an interesting year. It's an interesting year. And in this year, it's a year set up for you to be more abundant, to have more if you would like more. But here's what it takes. I'm going to tell you what it takes. It takes pursuit. It takes pursuing the wisdom of the one who has wisdom. That's what it takes. See, because without pursuit of wisdom, then you can't see the abundance. You will continue to look through the same lens. I will continue to look through the same lens, but no more of that. It's take off the scales from your eyes and say, you know what? I can see now. When Jesus healed the blind person and the scales came off their eyes. In essence, we have to allow the scales to drop off our eyes so that we can see. Remember, gold was in the land. Gold was in the garden where there was nothing to buy, nothing to sell, but yet it was there. Abundance is sitting in your homes. Abundance is sitting in your minds. Abundance is in your hands. Abundance is waiting for you. Abundance is saying, hey, will you put me in the game? Will you do that? Will you put me in so I can show you how it works? In Proverbs 18:16, it says, your gift maketh room for you and brings you before kings. You have one gift. You have one life. So live it to the fullest. Guys, I appreciate you for joining me for this episode of the Account for Life podcast. Jay Moore, the Healthy Accountant, helping you to account for your life. God bless. I'll see you on the next episode. Peace.
Thanks for joining us, listening friends. We are so glad you invested this time with us. Always remember, you only have one life to live, so live it to the fullest. This has been the Account for Your Life podcast with your host, the Healthy Accountant himself, Jay Moore. Until next time, make it a great day.